In my previous videos, I talked about Ansible and how you can install it. I also shared the requirements.txt file in which I shared the exact Ansible version which I installed on my machine. And this is usually a good idea because if I install the same version using the same requirements.txt, I can make sure that it will work on your machine the same way. Except it was not a container, it was just Python, which means if you have an older Python version on your machine, then it could work differently or it might not work at all. And this is what happened because I used my macOS, my MacBook, and I also used a virtual machine on MacBook. It was an Ubuntu 22.04, and I had the latest Python versions. Then later, after recording that video, I tried it on an older Ubuntu LTS version, Ubuntu 20.04, and it didn't work. That Ubuntu version had an older Python version, Python 3.8, and since this was too old for Ansible 8, I either have to downgrade my Ansible version, which I don't want to, I like to use recent Ansible versions, or I have to show you a way to install a newer Python version on older Ubuntu distributions. So this is what I will do now. And if you follow me on YouTube or you read my blog post, then you know that I like to use containers. In this case, I didn't want to use a container because if I do that, then I basically force you to run Docker just to be able to run Ansible. And that's my first reason. And the second, if you have a Windows operating system or a Mac OS, then you will probably install Docker Desktop. And that also means that if you run a container, you also run a virtual machine because that's how Docker Desktop runs Docker containers inside a virtual machine. So I will not use containers today in this video, but I will show you how you can use the Nix package manager, which can run on Linux and also on macOS. As usually, I have a blog post about this topic and I will share the link under the video. And now the first step, we have to install the Nix package manager from the documentation. If you scroll down in my blog post, you will find the link to the documentation. So let's open it. Here you can find how you can install the Nix package manager on Linux, macOS, and also on Windows. In case of Windows, you will actually use the Windows subsystem for Linux, which is basically Linux. So let's talk about Linux and macOS. On Linux, you can install it as a daemon, which is the recommended solution. So this is how I installed it on my system. And also you can use it and run it as a single user installation without the daemon. On macOS, there is only one command. Since the installation process was so easy, I don't want to talk about that. I already installed it on my macOS and also on Linux. If you have any problem with the installation, please let me know in the comment section and I will try to find a solution for you. Now it's time to use the Nix package manager, so let's go back to the blog post and we will scroll down even more. We will only use the Nix shell. The Nix package manager is much more than we will talk about in this video. We only want to use it to have a new Python version on an older Ubuntu distribution. So let's learn about how we can use the Nix shell. With the Python interpreter in the shell, after -p we have a package name, and if you don't know what package names you can use, you can go back to the documentation, and here you will find a search icon, and you can just search for Python or any package you want to install. For example, JQ. Okay, so I will run this Nix shell command. And actually, before I run this command, I want to remove all my old packages, the Nix packages. So I will run nix collect garbage on Linux and also on macOS. And after that, I can run nix shell -p python 3.11. If I run it, I will have a Python interpreter in the Nix shell. Let's do the same on macOS. And now that I have a Nix shell on my macOS, I can try to use which Python, which will show me where the Python command is. You can see that it starts with Nix store, so this is actually in my Nix shell. I can do the same on Linux, which Python, and I get the same result. So now I want to install the requirements, Ansible and Ansible core. So I need the pip package manager for Python. If I run the pip command here, you can see that it is using an older Python version because this pip belongs to my Python outside the Nix shell. So I will have to install the pip package manager in the Nix shell. Let's exit the shell and add Python 3.11 packages pip here and also on macOS. So if I run which pip or just pip version, now I can see it is using the right pip and Python. On macOS, I have the same result. Now I have the same result. The next step, we will need a virtual environment. We could just try to use pip here. Let's try that. I want to install requirements using the requirements.txt. If I run this command, I will get a warning, an error message, because I don't have permission to write the folder in which it would try to install the packages. Exit the shell and add -p python 3.11 packages .virtualenv. Let's see what the problem is. Okay, let's do the same on macOS. And finally, I can create my virtual environments. I will use the same folders in the virtual machine because that is just a mounted version of the folder on the host on my macOS. So you can see the same contents here. I have to remove my old virtual environment files folders. And now I will create new virtual environments. First on Linux, Python -m virtualenv, and I will call it venv Linux. And on macOS, I will run Python -m virtualenv venv. I have to activate these environments. On Linux, I have to use the venv-linux folder. And on macOS, I will source venv bin activate. And now I can install requirements on Linux and also on macOS. Now we can try Ansible command, Ansible version. It works, and you can also see that this is in my virtual environment. On my macOS, I can see that it is in my virtual environment. So now I have two virtual environments, and I actually don't need the Nix shell, so I can exit the shell and activate the environment without the Nix shell. Source VM Linux bin activate. And it still works. On macOS, I can exit the shell and source the VM bin activate. And it still works. So since I don't really need the Nix shell, I can write a script in which I can create the environment automatically and also install the requirements. And after that, I can use my other script to activate the right environment. So this is my shell script, the Nix shell script. The first line will tell my operating system that I want to execute this script using the Nix shell. After that, I will have other lines which will be interpreted by the Nix shell. And these are similar to the first shebang line, except it will interpret it by the Nix shell. The first line will tell the Nix shell that I want to use the bash after the command section. I will install the Python interpreter, then I will install the pip package manager and also the virtual environment module. And the last command line will tell the Nix shell that I want to use a specific version of the Nix packages. And now I have a very simple shell script. It will create the environment and install the requirements from the requirements.txt. This is it. Let's run it. First, I have to deactivate my older environments. And because I want to recreate them, I also have to remove them. Let's remove VM and VM Linux. Now we can run create nixenv. I have to pass the name of the virtual environment, which is VM Linux. And on macOS, I will run with the venv argument. And now we can activate the environment on Linux using homelab env os, because this is what will determine what operating system I'm on, and add the suffix to the venv. So let's run this, or I have to source it, so this will work. Okay, and the Ansible version command will work, I hope, if I type it correctly. Let's activate the environment on macOS. Here I will use source homelab env sh without the os suffix. Let's run Ansible version, and it works. So this is how you can use the Nix package manager on Linux and also on macOS. And if you have any question about this video, please let me know in the comment section. If you want to learn about the topic and you want me to create a video about that, please also share your ideas under the video.